the largest economy in Southeast Asia. Indonesia, a diverse archipelago nation of more than 300 ethnic groups, has charted impressive economic growth since overcoming the Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s. Today, Indonesia is the world's fourth most populous nation and seventh largest economy in terms of purchasing power parity. Furthermore, Indonesia has made enormous gains in poverty reduction, cutting the poverty rate by more than half since 1999 to under 10% in 2019. Before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the economy grew by almost 8 times in just 2 decades, from $165 billion in 2000 to $1,186 billion in 2022, when its economy was measured in nominal GDP, according to the World Bank. In terms of per capita, the average earnings of every Indonesian also grew 6-fold, from $780 in 2000 to $4,788 in 2022. Indonesia is now considered an upper-middle-income country with GNI per capita reaching 4,576. Indonesia is a market economy with abundant natural resources, a young, large, and burgeoning population of 277.7 million, and a labor force of 135 million people in 2022. With its political and economic stability, Indonesia is seen as a future economic giant. A report by one of the globe's largest professional services firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers or PwC, predicts Indonesia will boast the world's fourth most powerful economy by 2050. According to the report, Indonesia's projected rise from its current position as the 7th largest economy in the world to the 4th largest, behind only China, India, and the United States, represents a trend towards emerging economies coming to dominate the 21st century. While Indonesia's economy could be the world's 4th largest by 2050, the gap between the 3rd and 4th largest economies may be significant. The projected 3rd largest economy, the United States, is expected to be 325% larger than Indonesia's economy in 2050. The report assumes Indonesia will have a slower rate of technological progress compared to G7 economies in the short term, but will accelerate and will catch up in the long term as it strengthens its institutional frameworks. But in order for Indonesia to realize its growth potential, PwC urges the government to implement structural reforms to improve macroeconomic stability, diversify the economy away from undue reliance on natural resources, and develop more effective political and legal institutions. The PwC report outlines how Indonesia's economy will grow based on a rigorous modeling approach focusing on fundamental drivers of growth such as demographics and productivity. President Widodo has acknowledged in the past that now is the era of competition and has accelerated infrastructure reform and moved towards a more open economy. But Indonesia still has an overdependence on resource exports, and Widodo has focused more on political maneuvering recently rather than on grand economic reform. Despite this, the PwC report paints a promising picture of Indonesia's potential, giving future governments a blueprint to develop the nation into an economic powerhouse in the decades to come. Indonesia's economic growth in the second quarter accelerated unexpectedly to its highest rate in 3 quarters, shored up by strong household and government spending, even as exports weakened with falling commodity prices. Southeast Asia's biggest economy expanded 5.17% in the April to June quarter from the same period a year earlier, slightly higher than the first quarter growth of 5.04%, but slower than the 5.44% recorded growth in the second quarter last year. The expansion is also higher compared to ASEAN nations, which already published the 2023 Q2 economic figures. Some economists still expect activity to slow in the second half of the year, with exports likely to keep falling due to weaker global demand and businesses potentially delaying investments ahead of general elections due in February 2024. The government plans to boost spending this quarter to reach its 5.3% growth target for the year. However, the Finance Ministry is projecting that GDP growth will be around 5.1% this year, highlighting risks of global economic slowdown impacting exports. Currently, the usual key drivers of the economy are private domestic consumption, stimulated by its huge market with a growing middle class of over 70 million people, which contributes to 55% of GDP. The country changed from being an economy that was highly dependent on agriculture into a more balanced economy, lessening its traditional dependency on primary exports. The agricultural sector contributes to 13.3% of the country's GDP and employed 29% of the active population in 2022. Indonesia is the second largest natural rubber producer in the world. Other major crops include rice, sugarcane, coffee, tea, tobacco, palm oil, coconuts, and spices. The industry contributed approximately 39.9% of GDP and employed over 23% of the labor force in 2022. The industrial sector includes the manufacturing of textiles, cement, chemical fertilizers, electronic products, rubber tires, clothing, and shoes. Most of these are for the American market. Besides, the country is the world's biggest nickel ore producer and has become a major exporter of stainless steel. The service sector contributes to 42.8% of the GDP and employed around 48% of the active population in 2022. Tourism is a major source of revenue, although the sector has suffered from terrorist threats and natural catastrophes in the past few years. The government was expecting the country to become a leading Asian and world tourism destination by 2045 with 73 million tourists. Indonesia is open to foreign trade, which represented 40% of its GDP in 2022. Indonesia became the world's largest exporter of thermal coal used in power stations in 2019 and has two major customers, China and India, the planet's two largest coal importers. China remained Indonesia's largest trading partner in 2022, buying up 24% of exports, followed by the United States 12%, Japan 8%, and India 5.9%. The main suppliers are China 29%, Singapore 8.1%, Japan 7.6%, and the United States 5.9%, according to the latest data published by BPS Statistics Indonesia. Indonesia amassed a $3.9 billion trade surplus in December 2022, thereby maintaining a positive trade balance since May 2020. For the period from January to December 2022, therefore, the overall trade surplus stood at $54.4 billion, up significantly from $35.4 billion in the same period of 2021, based on the report of Bank Indonesia. For the full year of 2022, exports climbed by 26.07% from the same period in 2021 to $291.9 billion. Imports to Indonesia